So this is going to be a video about my personal experience with online bullying and stalking and defamation. And I do want to give a heads up that suicide does come up in this video, so just a warning. It's extremely difficult for me to talk about this, but I'm doing so for two reasons. One, I don't want anyone who's being victimized online to feel as alone as I have felt for the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And two, I want anyone who participates in these kinds of online hate campaigns to listen to me very carefully. If you think you are anonymous, if you think you are invincible, if you think that you won't ever be found and asked to defend the things you've said and done, you are sorely, sorely mistaken. Now, I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this story sounds like something out of a shitty tabloid magazine or a Lifetime movie. It is so bizarre and so complicated, in fact, that the idea of even retelling it in its entirety has been arguably one of the most daunting things about this entire process. I felt like people wouldn't believe me. But everything you're about to hear and see really happened. So I guess we start at the beginning. I have talked this to death by now, but in case there's anyone watching who doesn't know this, my dog Dagwood was hit by a car in October 2018, and a friend of mine started a GoFundMe for us in the hopes of saving his life, and it did. The detail that I didn't mention at the time was that my ex-husband was the one driving the car that hit him. In July of 2020, I finally publicly came out with that detail, and I tried as best as I could to explain why I was so scared to tell the truth at the time. And of course, offered refunds to anyone who requested one. Shortly after, I was made aware that there was a subreddit called Snark, where people go to complain about Instagram influencers and internet personalities. But in the wake of my admission about Dag's accident, some folks decided that I deserved my own thread. So pretty immediately, this thread was taken down. This was June or July of 2020, because it had been flagged so many times for causing suicidal ideation to the subject being targeted, me. Even the moderators of the main Snark page publicly acknowledged that they thought that this particular thread about me was going too far. Everyone knew why it was taken down. And in response to that, two women started a separate subreddit dedicated to me called Media Snark. I couldn't even begin to try to understand the mindset of people who do things like this, but here's my best guess. I think this group of people were waiting on bated breath for the truth about Dagwood's accident to come out, because they were anticipating that the whole world was going to turn on me, that everything was going to be over for me, that I was going to be totally wiped from the face of the earth. But that didn't happen. 99.99% of you were arguably more supportive, so forgiving, like just blew me away with how kind everybody was. And while everybody would be fully entitled, I would never release the names of people just for asking for their money back. That is totally within their right. Of course, that's why I offered it. But of the over 7,000 individual donations, there were 6 people who asked for their money back, which I promptly and privately gave them. All anyone had to do was send their GoFundMe email receipt and either a Venmo or a PayPal to my email address, and I would send reimbursement. Now, this infuriated the people on this thread because they suddenly had no more ammunition, right? Like this was supposed to be the thing, the big reveal that was gonna take me down. And when it didn't, they became obsessed with trying to find other ways to do it. So it started with faceless, nameless accounts, as so many things on the internet do. They would leave comments on my photos saying that they had asked me for a refund and I had refused. This is categorically false, as I have well-documented records and screenshots of every refund requested and every dime refunded. Regardless, each time I responded the same way. Please send your GoFundMe receipt to briannamedia@gmail.com and we'll get it settled. No email ever came because this person did not donate. They just wanted to make sure that as publicly as they could continue making people believe I was still doing something wrong. And so when that plot didn't wipe me from the face of the earth, as they were so hoping, they doubled down. Boy, did they double down. They went after every single aspect of my life. In the midst of me filing for divorce from my now ex-husband. But we'll talk more about that later. I will keep this as short as I can, but realistically, it's not short. So without further ado, here is what these people have done to me over the last 3 years. It started small with fake accounts like Brianna Media is a dumpster fire, and Brianna Media is a scammer, and Brianna Media is a plague rat, etc., etc. They even made a fake LinkedIn account under my name that said I was a professional scammer. The dedication right off the bat is astounding. Then the emails started. Anonymous emails sending me all kinds of awful things. This one sticks permanently in my mind. This was a few weeks after I had moved out of my house. Basically, they had just started to torture me for fun. So this sort of low-level, albeit still horrible, harassment continued throughout the fall of 2020 until I could not take it anymore. So I left Instagram in November and took several months off with the intention of trying to keep myself alive. During that hiatus, I crossed paths with a woman named Michelle, who told me she was a big fan. She was getting a tattoo from the same artist that all of my tattoos are from. I sat with her. I listened to her life stories. I jumped up and ran out and got her favorite Starbucks drink. And then because I thought she was a kind person, I shared some of the things I was going through at the time. And apparently I am a really, really bad judge of character because this woman left that day and took all of the context of our private conversation and fed it to this ravenous, obsessive Reddit mob. So once I returned to Instagram, it's early 2021, I learned that Michelle is actually contacting all of my sponsors and companies that I was working for at the time, saying that a friend of mine and myself were harassing her. The claim was that we were somehow in possession of and distributing pornographic images of her. I emailed her directly to assure her that I nor my friend would ever do something like that. But her campaign continued. She began posting step-by-step instructions on the Reddit for how to continue to contact my sponsors, how many fake accounts to make, what to say, how often to call them and say how problematic I was. No, we can all sit here, right, and say, that's insane. Who on earth would believe that an influencer who met a random woman in a tattoo shop has suddenly acquired and is distributing pornography? Like, it sounds nuts. I laughed when I heard what I was being accused of. But I lost 4 sponsorships because of that. It was still the height of cancel culture in early 2021. So everyone was just terrified of being next. And anytime a photo of mine was shared on a company's account, or even a picture of like my dog where I wasn't even in it, they would get bombarded with comments. She's a bad person. She hit her dog. She's a liar. She's racist. She's this and that. So to avoid any more potential controversy, basically during the height of internet controversy, these companies just hung me out to dry. And it was at this point that I realized I needed to get a lawyer. So I hired a defamation attorney in Salt Lake City, and I had him reach out to some of these companies that had let me go, demanding evidence of what I had been accused of. And it seemed to dawn on them only then that they had never received any. Those anonymous accounts just gave them enough of a headache on their social pages and their customer service channels that it was easier for them to just drop me. Nulo Dog Food actually tweeted that they were no longer working with me before they told me that they were no longer working with me. This was then posted all over the Reddit, of course, and they were just dancing in the streets. They were so excited it had worked. They were getting away with it. They were systematically removing my income. They felt legitimized because those companies legitimized them. They legitimized their behavior. By the way, after the truth came out, that this was all some personal vendetta, 2 of those companies asked me to work with them again, and I told them to kick rocks because I will take my dignity over a paycheck every day of the week. I also had my lawyer send a demand letter to Michelle. Ultimately, I was demanding one simple thing. I wanted her to publicly apologize and admit that she had fabricated all of this. But of course, she didn't apologize, and she didn't stop making new accounts to be a part of the Reddit thread. But I chose not to pursue it further legally at the time because I honestly wasn't strong enough to have to keep looking at all of these pages and comments and things that people shouldn't read about themselves ever, because it felt like it was going to kill me at the time, so I couldn't. And while Michelle did some real serious damage to my life, this vile little community was actually pissed at her because she had used her real name to contact my sponsors. And so she had compromised the anonymity of the group. And in an even more bizarre twist, she then emailed me saying like, oh, I only did this because I thought the Reddit people were my friends. After the loss of my sponsorships, which were at the time my only source of income, these people contacted my publishing house urging them to cancel my book deal. They thought they were the first ones to tell them about the truth of Dagwood's accident, which will always be hilarious to me because that story was included in the proposal that my publishing house accepted almost a year prior. Anyways, the person who sent this message then actually sent a link to the subreddit as a source of evidence for my publisher to go review. A subreddit where a bunch of people with bizarre usernames call me a bitch and a whore and an alcoholic and a drug addict and a liar and a cheat. A place where people enjoyed sharing photos of my face with penises photoshopped onto it. Of course, as we all know, my book deal was not canceled. My book was, in fact, a New York Times bestseller. But it just goes to show how delusional these people had become. They actually viewed this blatant hate page as a source of proof of something. They actually felt unashamed to send that to HarperCollins Publishing House. It's like if your name was John Green and someone emailed your boss with a website called John Green Sucks and expected them to take that as an accurate source of unbiased information. From there, it just got worse and worse and worse. They called hotels I was staying in and claimed I was doing drugs in the room. They posed as family members and friends on this subreddit, claiming they knew me in real life and sharing things I had done. They claimed to see me out here and there, and her dogs attacked my dogs. She was screaming at me in a slot canyon. They claimed that they saw me steal things out of stores, berate service people. They posted my address, my phone numbers, the addresses of my friends' homes and their families' homes. Within 30 minutes of me posting a few little 15-second stories of my fiance's house that he had just bought, they had found the Zillow listing. And then they reverse image searched all of the furniture we bought for the house so they could talk about how much it cost because, in their minds, I am still living off of the GoFundMe money from 4 years ago. As most of us know by now, they created a once again fake nameless account to send a long message to the owner of an Airbnb I was staying in one weekend. Let me just be clear. They searched through every Airbnb in Salt Lake City to match up the images of the house that they could make out on my Instagram stories. They told the owner my dogs were tearing up the place and running loose on the property and killing the squirrel in the yard tree. And of course, that I was having a party where multiple substances were being used. Little did they know that the Airbnb was a duplex and the owner's parents lived downstairs and were obviously able to say that this was all categorically false. They openly fantasized about committing actual violent acts against me and others who were discussed on this thread, including wanting to pay $10 for the chance to punch my friend Katie's partner in the face. They made insane claims and conspiracy theories about everything from my property to my book to my divorce. And then, of course, there's the kicker that absolutely sent me over the edge. I was informed that my ex-husband, Keith, and two of his older siblings had all joined in on this thread as well. I was so shocked. The lengths I went to protect that man. Changing his name in my book, making sure his name couldn't be typed under any of my photos, removing all images of him, leaving out so much of my own story so as not to overshare his in my book. It was all just a vicious slap in the face for someone who you spent 11 years with. However, the involvement of his family did not surprise me for 1 minute because those folks are something else. Anyway, first Keith and I start posting, sort of just lurking on the thread, hinting that they had personal information about Brianna, but not revealing their identities. So eventually Cody, one of these two women who started this whole thread, reach out, and she and Keith exchange phone numbers so they could start texting. And then she would post the screenshots of their messages onto the Reddit. She also began personally speaking with my ex-husband's siblings. Mind you, this is a woman who had never met me, never met my ex-husband or any of his family, and now she's on the phone with them discussing my hate page. That is the level of infiltration into my personal life that this complete stranger achieved. So eventually, bolstered by Cody and the other Redditors, Keith decides to just come right out with it and post a public statement, which these people gleefully pinned to the top of the page so it was as public as possible. And in this weird, rambling paragraph, he makes bizarre claims, admits totally unnecessary private details about his own substance abuse struggles, and then essentially bashes all of the people who tried to save his life. These are things I would never, ever have made public on his behalf, but here we are. How do I know for certain it was him? He was kind enough to post a selfie, confirming that this was him and saying this was all a part of his healing journey, which is one of the saddest things I've ever heard.
It also has to be said that before my ex-husband came to share this journey, he was on this thread, just saying mean things and enjoying the company of a bunch of people who didn't care if this all made his ex-wife commit suicide. Now, he has every right to share his story, his interpretation of events, his thoughts, but there, on a hate page dedicated to the person you once cared about, that is so cruel.
In the fall of 2021, months before my book was even available to the public, these people went on to the website Goodreads and left over 50 one-star reviews, bashing it, claiming they had received some non-existent early copy. Many of them just copied their vile, poorly spelled comments from the Reddit about me being a narcissistic bitch and a liar and a scammer and so forth. They were even able to get one of my book tour events canceled in early 2022 by once again creating multiple social and email accounts to contact the Black female owner of the bookstore that was set to host it. They claimed that I was a danger to Black people, prompting the owner to send an email out, canceling the event, and posting this to their public Instagram story. Now, most folks who had signed up for my event were well aware of the harassment that had been going on for over a year, two almost at this point. So unsurprisingly, the bookstore starts getting dozens of angry calls from people saying, what on earth were you told? Why are you doing this? And then, of course, beyond the angry customers, she had to field calls from both my lawyer as well as HarperCollins publishing house's legal team. When asked to send proof of what I had been accused of, are we noticing a pattern here yet? She literally had nothing, except for messages from anonymous burner accounts saying things like, this woman is racist. That's it. No photo, no nothing, no nothing. And as angry as I was, ultimately, she is just as much a victim of these women as I've been, because this is a bunch of white women using a fake social justice angle to further their own agendas of just being hateful. They would go so far as to claim that they themselves were women of color to make their claims seem more substantial. Of course, they're not. They are also white women. So as a result of their blind obsession with me, They caused actual harm to that Black woman and her business. So infuriating. These people had an actual effect on real friendships I had, because everyone I knew was being dragged in and targeted by these people purely for being associated with me in any way. And what broke my heart the most, and still does, were the women who didn't even know me outside of Instagram, other influencers or outdoor athletes who would get talked about on this thread. This thread had my name on it. And I used to imagine how much they must have hated me, those women, because whether I liked it or not, technically, I was the reason that it existed in the first place. And so it felt like my fault. And my very existence started to feel like a liability. And that's when I started really isolating myself. And that's when suicide really started to seem like the only option. Of course, these people already knew that they were causing me suicidal ideation, and they reveled in it. They loved it. They thought it was funny. They'd say things like, oh, she wants to unalive herself. As I mentioned, I was not the only person targeted in these threads, but I only feel comfortable speaking to the specifics of my own experience. But broadly, these other folks were also doxxed, harassed, defamed, stalked. My friends' addresses have been posted. They've been emailed by people pretending to be lawyers. They've been accused of committing tax fraud. They spoke so frequently of my friend's newborn baby that when you would Google that baby's name, a hate thread would pop up. And I know firsthand, at least 5 women who were talked about on that thread had suicidal thoughts. I know 2 women who will never interact with the internet or social media in any sort of a public way ever again because of all of this. But here's where the story takes a turn. I plan to discuss this process more in the future, but God, what a journey we're already on here. So for the sake of brevity, over a year ago, a digital forensics investigator stepped in and began working her way up through the ranks of this thread, making all these people believe she was one of them. Which this should also serve as a warning to people on the internet. Even if you are an anonymous person, you shouldn't trust other anonymous people. But she's able to prove these people's identities with endless screenshots and data collection, along with cross-referencing photos these individuals posted on like other Reddit threads, but with their same username, and on their Instagrams, which were very clearly their usernames. Here's a real simple example. Here's a photo that Cody White, one of the creators of the thread, posted of her dog on her public Instagram account. And here is a nearly identical photo Cody posted of her dog under her Reddit username. Here's some other things posted under that very same Reddit username. But it's all that investigator's hard work, God, I love her, that brings us here today. I used to think that a handful of people on the internet hating you wouldn't matter if there were so many thousands of people that were supportive and cared about you and liked following you. But nowadays that doesn't mean anything, because one person can create 40 accounts and send 100 different messages or leave 20 anonymous comments, and suddenly that's an uproar. The best part, these folks never had to say who they were, how they knew me, if they knew me. They didn't have to provide context, photos, proof. They didn't have to say their name, a photo of their face. Nothing. Not a damn thing. These people's behavior was enabled by so many different parties. This thread was not some underground, unknown thing. People in the industry would see one screenshot they thought was interesting or one inflammatory accusation from this thread about myself or anyone else mentioned, and they'd just run off and use that for like their content, for their podcasts and their print articles. They'd scroll through looking for the little parts they could use, but they never seemed to stop and take a step back and see this whole thing for what it was, which from start to finish was a blatant hate page, plain and simple. And people gave this thing merit. They gave it airtime. They didn't treat it like it was dangerous. They treated it like it was entertaining. They made it seem normal or almost expected. You're an influencer. What did you expect? In fact, many folks seem to file it under the holding influencers accountable category. But maybe we're all ready as a society to admit that the whole holding people accountable is just a fancy way of saying, I'm going to call out the people I already hate. Because to this day, no one has ever really explained to me what it was that I was being held accountable for. My dog's accident, the one I've apologized for on a weekly basis for years, the one that ruined my life, that destroyed my marriage, that turned me into this awful defensive version of myself. I live with this every day. I have to see Dagwood scars every day. This has no bearing on anyone's life but mine. So how much more accountable do I have to be? Like, what penance do I need to pay? What is going to be enough that I'm accountable now, right? Like, ultimately, these people left the computer screen and infiltrated my real life, my private life. And to say that I am traumatized is a grievous understatement. I know for a fact I won't ever be the same because of all of this. Because with this level of dedication and obsession and relentlessness, you start to feel like I must deserve this. I must be that bad. I must be that much of a burden to the people around me. And I must be all the things they're saying that I am. And I've never felt that hopeless. I drove to a sporting goods store in the summer of 2021 and I bought a handgun. And I sat up at my trailer the following day just holding it. I had previously told my therapist that the only way I was going to make this stop is if I opened Instagram Live and blew my head off. And even now, even saying this right now, there's this like muscle memory in my brain of just like hearing them laughing at me or hearing them just take like delight in what I just said. I used to say that I'd been canceled, but it went so much further than that. I wasn't canceled, I was stalked and doxxed and defamed and harassed and tortured. Why? Because it was fun for them. It was their hobby. They quite literally refer to themselves as a community. These are genuinely dangerous people. And after writing all this down, sitting here saying all of this out loud, one after another, I'm just still in complete shock at what they were able to do. I also very much believe that the world deserves to know exactly who they are. So, you wanted the tea? There's the whole damn pot. This story is so bizarre, so embarrassing to tell. I feel humiliated having to share all of this, but this really happened to me and to a lot of people that I care about. And so many people let it happen. Because apparently we live in a world where someone who doesn't like you can just accuse you of something without any proof and effectively dismantle your entire life. Apparently we live in a world where a goddamn blue check mark next to my name means I am no longer human. I am fair game. I should just accept it or ignore it. Well, guess what? Being able to ignore it doesn't mean that you should, because ignoring it doesn't make you strong. It makes you complacent. Because there's some folks who can't ignore it and they're taking their own lives because of it. And this isn't a joke. So I'm not going to sit here and be a bystander as the world devolves into this lawless hellhole in which people like this win. So I am going to take this story as far and as wide as I need to, because I'm going to make sure everyone knows what this has been like. And I'm going to make sure anyone who ever wants to leave another nasty anonymous comment thinks twice.